Welcome to Ship of the Week. This week's vessel is the Brazilian coastal defense ship Marshal Deodoro. Conceived at a time when the Brazilian Navy, like that of many industrialized nations, was in the process of a rapid modernization as warship technological development spiraled, the new ship, named for Deodoro de Fonseca, the first president of independent Brazil, was laid down in La Seine, France in 1896, and launched 2 years later, before a crowd of Brazilian and French dignitaries amid great fanfare. Ready for service by 1900, Deodoro was 267 feet long, displaced 3,162 tons, and could make between 15 and 16 knots in good conditions. Her two 9.2-inch main guns and an array of secondary weapons, coupled with her relatively low speed, were indicative of her intended coastal defense role rather than one which would see her engage with other big-gun battleships. She was, at the time, however, fairly capable for her size. The new ship completed her delivery voyage across the Atlantic in early 1900, but was forced to explain herself to the British Royal Navy along the way, which, engaged in a war with the South African Boer republics at the time, seemed to be under the impression she was a Boer threat to southern Atlantic merchant traffic, which, of course, made little sense while she flew the Brazilian flag. The two forces did not come to a head, and the new Brazilian warship was allowed to continue on her way unabated, if a little annoyed. Much of Deodoro's career with the Brazilian Navy was dominated by various military rebellions against the young nation's authorities. Her crew fired upon the military academy at Praia Vermelha in 1904, seen here before the incident, and she herself rebelled as part of a much larger naval revolt of the Lash in 1910, in which crews protested the use of flogging predominantly to unfairly disciplined sailors of African descent. The latter incident did not result in any shots fired before it was quelled. Deodoro and her sister, Floriana, were heavily modernized in 1912 to improve their power plants and armament, but no further action beyond these internal skirmishes and various fleet drills would take place until Deodoro and many of her fleetmates were deployed as territorial defense forces during the First World War. Deodoro herself was assigned squadron leader of the forces responsible for patrolling northern Brazil while the nation was neutral, and this assignment meant she saw little action for the duration of the conflict once Brazil actually entered it. Not long after the conclusion of hostilities, the Brazilian Navy, rightly, found Deodoro to be somewhat obsolete, and, looking to acquire the beginnings of the submarine fleet, sold her to the Mexican Navy in 1924. The Mexicans renamed her Anahuac, and despite her status as one of the most powerful ships ever commissioned in the Mexican Navy, much of this time was spent in auxiliary roles. She remained in service with the Mexican Navy until she was broken up in 1938.